The cargo bay of Kepler 442b mining station smelled like oil and rust. In the darkest corner, behind stacks of metal crates, a small figure sat curled up like a broken doll. Her name was Zira, and she was trying very hard not to cry. Her skin looked like living crystal, but instead of sparkling prettily, it glowed deep purple with sadness. This was how her people showed feelings, through colors that danced across their skin. Right now, the purple was so dark it almost looked black. Zira pulled her thin knees closer to her chest. 6 months ago, she had parents who loved her. 6 months ago, she had a home and warm meals and bedtime stories. Then came the transport accident that took everything away. The ship her parents were traveling on hit an asteroid field. No survivors. Now she was alone on this cold station, and nobody wanted her. The Vithani Council had made that very clear. She is not pure Vithani, they said in their cold voices. Her father was Terran mix. We cannot waste resources on a half-breed. The word half-breed always made Zira's skin flash angry red, but she had learned to control it. Showing anger only made things worse. The other aliens on the station were no better. The tall, gray Centauri with their big black eyes would look right through her like she was invisible. The furry Corvin merchants would hiss and make ward signs when she walked by, as if she carried bad luck. Even the robot workers seemed programmed to avoid her. Station Administrator Vex had tried to find her a family. 3 different species had looked at her adoption papers. The first family took one look at her mixed heritage and walked away. The second family said they didn't want to deal with emotional problems. The third family never even showed up. Nobody wants damaged goods, she had heard one of them whisper. Zira's stomach growled loudly. She pressed her hand against it, trying to make the hunger go away. The station gave her basic food rations, but they tasted like cardboard and never seemed like enough. She was getting thinner each week, and her crystal skin was losing its natural shine. Heavy footsteps echoed through the cargo bay. Zira quickly scooted deeper behind the crates, making herself as small as possible. Usually people just walked through without noticing her, which was fine. Being ignored was better than being yelled at. But these footsteps stopped. "Hey there," said a voice. It was deep but gentle, speaking in standard. "You okay back there?" Zira's skin flashed white with fear. She held her breath and didn't move. The footsteps came closer. "I can see you, kiddo. Those glowing crystals kind of give you away." A man appeared around the edge of the crates. He was human. Zira could tell by his soft skin and brown hair. Humans were rare on the outer stations. Most aliens thought they were too new to space travel, too primitive to matter. This one was wearing a worn leather jacket and had kind blue eyes. He crouched down to her level, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. "My name's Jake Morrison. I'm a freight hauler. What's your name?" Zira stared at him with wide silver eyes. In all her time on the station, no adult had ever asked her name. Not once. "Zira," she whispered in her small voice. "That's a pretty name," Jake said with a smile. "What are you doing back here, Zira? This isn't really a safe place for kids." "Nowhere is safe for me," Zira said, then immediately wished she hadn't spoken. Talking to strangers was dangerous. But something about this human felt different. Jake's face grew serious. He looked at her thin arms and the way her ribs showed through her simple clothes. His eyes took in the faded purple glow of her skin and the sadness written in every line of her small body. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" he asked gently. Zira thought about it. The ration bars didn't count as real food. "I don't remember," she admitted. Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Are your parents on the station? Your family?" The question hit Zira like a physical blow. Her skin flashed through several colors: red pain, blue sorrow, and finally back to that deep purple of despair. "Dead," she whispered. "Transport accident. 6 months ago." "And there's no one taking care of you?" Zira shook her head. "The council says I'm not worth their time. Half-breed, they call me." Father was mixed race, not pure Vithani. Nobody wants me. Her voice broke on the last words, and a single tear rolled down her crystal cheek, catching the light like a tiny diamond. Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. I had a little sister once. Her name was Lisa. She died when she was about your age. I couldn't save her. He paused. But maybe I can help you. Why? Zira asked. It was an honest question. Everyone else walks away. Why would you be different? Jake looked at her for a long time, as if trying to figure out the answer himself. Because walking away from someone who needs help isn't right. My mom taught me that. She said that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up for somebody. He stood up slowly, not wanting to startle her. I'm going to go talk to Administrator Vex, find out about your situation. Will you stay here? Zira nodded, not trusting her voice. Jake walked away, but he looked back twice to make sure she was still there. Zira watched him go, confused and hopeful and terrified all at once. Her skin couldn't decide what color to be, so it shifted between purple and gold like a sunset. She had given up believing that anyone would ever want her. She had accepted that she would probably die alone on this station, forgotten and unloved. But now this strange human man had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth saving. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Zira pulled her knees to her chest again and waited. For the first time in 6 months, the purple glow of her skin started to fade, replaced by tiny flecks of gold. Hope was a dangerous thing to feel, but she couldn't help it. Someone had finally stopped walking away. In the distance, she could hear Jake's voice talking to Administrator Vex, asking questions, demanding answers. The sound made her skin glow, a little brighter. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't going to be alone forever. Jake Morrison had seen a lot of unfair things in his 15 years of hauling freight across the galaxy, but what Administrator Vex told him made his blood boil. The child is a problem nobody wants to solve, Vex said, his forearms gesturing dismissively. He was a Kalari, with purple skin and too many teeth. Half-breed Vithani are considered unlucky by most species. Bad for business, you understand. She's a kid, Jake said flatly. A hungry, scared kid whose parents are dead. Vex shrugged with all 4 shoulders. The Centauri delegation examined her last month. They said her bloodline was tainted and refused adoption. The Corvin merchants wouldn't even look at her files. Something about mixed breeds bringing misfortune to their trade routes. Jake gripped the edge of Vex's desk. What about her own people, the Vithani? They made their position very clear. Pure Vithani bloodlines only. They have no responsibility for what they call genetic mistakes. Vex's tone was matter of fact, as if he was discussing cargo manifests instead of a child's life. So what happens to her? She stays on the station until she's old enough to work. Then she can pay for her own food and shelter, if she lives that long. Vex pulled up a hologram showing Zira's medical records. She's already malnourished. Vithani. Physiology is complex, especially mixed heritage. Without proper nutrition and care, she probably won't survive another year. Jake stared at the medical readout, his jaw clenched tight. The numbers were bad. Weight loss, mineral deficiencies, signs of chronic stress. This wasn't just neglect anymore. This was a death sentence. I want to file emergency guardianship papers, he said suddenly. Vex blinked all 6 of his eyes. You? But you're human. You know nothing about raising Vithani children. I know more than the people who are letting her starve, Jake shot back. What do I need to do? An hour later, Jake had signed more legal documents than he'd ever seen in his life. Emergency guardian status, medical authorization forms, species accommodation requirements. The paperwork seemed endless. But finally, it was done. He walked back to the cargo bay with a strange feeling in his chest. 3 days ago, he'd been a single guy running a one-man freight operation. Now he was responsible for a traumatized alien child who might not even want his help. Zira was still huddled behind the crates, but her skin had brightened to a lighter purple. When she saw him coming, she sat up straighter. "Hey there," Jake said, crouching down again. "I talked to Administrator Vex. Learned about your situation." Zira's skin flashed nervous yellow. "Are you going to leave now too?" "Actually, no. I filed some papers, made it official. If you want, you can come with me on my ship, be part of my crew." The words hung in the air between them. Zira stared at him with those big silver eyes, not quite believing what she'd heard. "You want me?" She whispered, "Yeah, kiddo, I want you." Her skin exploded in colors, gold and silver and bright blue all swirling together like a kaleidoscope. She started crying, but these weren't sad tears anymore. Jake wasn't sure what to do, so he just sat down on the floor next to her and waited. "Nobody ever wanted me before," she said through her tears. "Well, they were idiots," Jake said simply. "Come on, let me show you your new home." The Wanderer wasn't much to look at from the outside, just another mid-sized freight hauler with worn paint and mismatched repair panels. But inside, it was clean and comfortable. Jake had spent years making it feel like home. Zira followed him, through the ship like a nervous shadow, her skin shifting between curious green and fearful gray. Everything was so big compared to her. The corridors, the control panels, even the chairs were built for human-sized people. "This is the galley," Jake said, showing her the small kitchen area. "Food prep, storage, eating space. You hungry?" Zira nodded quickly. Jake rummaged through his supplies and found a nutrient bar, not fancy but better than station rations. He broke it in half and offered her a piece. She took it carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too fast. The first bite made her eyes go wide. "It's sweet," she said in amazement. "Yeah, I like the chocolate ones. We'll figure out what foods are good for your people. I'll do some research." Zira ate the entire half-bar in tiny, careful bites, making it last as long as possible. Jake pretended not to notice, but it broke his heart a little more with each bite. "This is the sleeping area." He continued the tour, showing her the small cabin with his bunk. "I'll set up a sleeping space for you. Might take a day or two to get it right, but we'll figure it out." "Where will you sleep?" she asked. "Don't worry about me. I've slept in the pilot's chair plenty of times." They ended the tour in the cockpit. Zira had never seen a ship's control room before. All the blinking lights and displays looked like magic to her. Jake settled into the pilot's seat and started the pre-flight sequence. "Where are we going?" she asked, settling carefully into the co-pilot's chair. "Nexus Station first, to pick up some supplies, things you'll need. Then we'll see what jobs are available." He looked over at her. "That okay with you?" Zira nodded, but her skin was cycling through nervous colors again. Yellow fear, blue worry with just hints of golden hope. "Jake?" she said in a small voice. "Yeah? What if I'm trouble? What if I break things or get sick or what if you change your mind about wanting me?" Jake stopped what he was doing and turned to face her fully. "Zira, look at me. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone gets sick sometimes, and I'm not changing my mind. You're stuck with me now, whether you like it or not." Her skin brightened to a warm gold color. "I like it," she whispered. "Good. Now let's get out of here." The Wanderer lifted off from Kepler 442b with its new passenger strapped safely in the co-pilot's seat. Zira pressed her face to the window, watching the mining station shrink below them until it was just another dot of light against the stars. For the first time in 6 months, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Her skin glowed steady gold as Jake engaged the hyperdrive and they jumped toward their new life together. She still didn't quite believe it was real, but Jake had said she was stuck with him now, and something deep in her heart told her he was, the kind of person who kept his promises. Behind them, the cold station continued its endless orbit. But ahead lay possibilities Zira had never dared to dream of. A home among the stars, and someone who had chosen her, not despite her differences, but without caring about them at all. 3 weeks into their journey together, Jake was learning that taking care of an alien child was harder than he'd expected. But it was also more rewarding than anything he'd ever done. The first challenge had been food. Vethani physiology required specific minerals that weren't found in standard human rations. Zira had tried to eat what Jake offered without complaining, but he could see her getting weaker. Her crystal skin grew dull, and the colors became muted. "Why didn't you tell me the food was making you sick?" Jake asked after catching her throwing up in the small bathroom. Zira's skin flashed a shamed red. "I didn't want to be trouble. I thought maybe I could get used to it." Jake knelt down beside her, offering a damp cloth for her face. "Zira, look at me. You're not trouble. If something's wrong, you need to tell me." That's what families do. They help each other. That word family made her skin shimmer with surprise gold. Jake spent hours researching Vethani dietary needs on the ship's computer. He learned about trace minerals, energy crystals that could be dissolved in water, and specific plant proteins their bodies required. At the next station, he spent most of his cargo profit on specialized food supplements. The difference was immediate. Within days, Zira's skin began to brighten, and she had energy to explore the ship instead of just sitting quietly in the corner. Sleep was another challenge. Vethani were used to communal sleeping spaces where the soft glow of their skin created a comforting light. Alone in the dark storage room Jake had converted into her bedroom, Zira would lie awake for hours, her skin pulsing with anxiety. Jake found her one night curled up on the floor outside his cabin, fast asleep. Her skin was cycling through nervous purples and blues even in her dreams. He carefully picked her up. She was so light it scared him, and tucked her into his own bunk. Then he settled into his reading chair with a blanket. When Zira woke up in the morning and realized what had happened, her skin went bright red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to take your bed." "It's okay," Jake said gently. "Bad dreams?" She nodded, then hesitated. "It's too dark when I'm alone. My people, we sleep together so our light keeps the shadows away. But I understand. If you don't want, how about we leave the doors open?" Jake suggested. "That way you won't be alone, but you'll still have your own space." It was a good compromise. With both cabin doors open, Zira's gentle glow provided soft light throughout the sleeping area, and Jake's presence nearby kept her nightmares at bay. Language was easier. Zira was incredibly smart and picked up standard quickly. But Jake also started learning basic words in Vethani, simple things like hello and good morning and are you hungry? Her face lit up like a sunrise the first time he wished her good night in her own language. "You sound terrible," she said with a giggle, the first time he'd heard her laugh. "But thank you for trying." The real breakthrough came during their 4th week together. Jake woke up to find Zira's skin pulsing deep red, the color of fever and pain. She was shivering despite the warm ship temperature, and her eyes were unfocused. "Hey kiddo, talk to me," Jake said, sitting on the edge of her bunk. "What's wrong?" "Feel sick," she whispered. "Everything hurts." Jake's research had covered Vethani illnesses. This looked like crystal fever, dangerous if not treated properly. He immediately changed course for the nearest station with medical facilities, but it would take 2 days to get there. For 3 days straight, Jake barely slept. He monitored Zira's temperature, gave her medicine, and kept her hydrated with mineral solutions. He read her stories from the ship's database, held cool cloths to her forehead, and stayed by her side even when she was too sick to know he was there. On the 3rd night, her fever finally broke. Jake had dozed off in the chair beside her bunk when he felt a gentle touch on his hand. He opened his eyes to find Zira awake, her skin glowing soft gold. "You stayed," she said simply. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I go?" Her eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears this time. "My birth parents would have stayed too, but nobody else ever has." Jake squeezed her small hand carefully. "I'm not going anywhere, Zira. You're stuck with me, remember?" She smiled, the first real, complete smile he'd seen from her. Good. That night marked a change in their relationship. Zira began to trust Jake completely. She started asking questions about everything, how the ship worked, what different planets were like, what it was like growing up human. Jake answered every question patiently, happy to see her curiosity return. In return, she began sharing stories about her life before the accident. Her parents had been traders who traveled between systems, and she'd grown up seeing different worlds and meeting different species. She told him about Vistani festivals, where everyone's skin would glow in patterns, creating light shows that could be seen from orbit. "I miss the singing," she said one evening as they shared dinner. "Vistani sing with colors as well as voices. When many of us are together, the light songs are beautiful. Can you show me?" Jake asked. Zira hesitated, then began to hum a soft melody. As she sang, her skin shifted through gentle colors, blue flowing into green, then gold, then silver. The patterns moved across her crystal surface like living art. "That's incredible," Jake said honestly. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Her skin brightened with pride and happiness. Jake also began sharing more of himself. He told her about growing up on Earth, about his sister Lisa, who died of a rare disease when she was young. He explained why he became a freight hauler, the freedom, the independence, the chance to help people by carrying cargo to places that needed it. "Lisa would have loved you," he said one night. "She always wanted a little sister. Do you think she would have minded sharing you with me?" Zira asked quietly. Jake smiled. "I think she would have insisted on it." They developed routines together. Zira learned to help with simple ship maintenance, her small hands useful for reaching tight spaces. Jake taught her basic piloting skills, letting her take the controls in safe space while he supervised. "Am I doing it right?" she asked, concentrating hard on keeping the ship steady. "You're a natural," Jake said proudly. "Few more years and you'll be a better pilot than me." Her skin glowed gold at the compliment. They were becoming a real family. Not the traditional kind either of them had expected, but something new and precious. Jake found himself looking forward to Zira's questions, her observations about the universe, the way her skin lit up when she was happy, and Zira began to understand something she'd never experienced before: unconditional love. Jake didn't care that she was half-breed or different or had emotional problems. He just cared about her well-being and happiness. "Jake?" she said one evening as they watched the stars through the cockpit window. "Yeah? I'm glad nobody else wanted me, because then I wouldn't have found you." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm glad too, kiddo. Best thing that ever happened to me." Her skin cycled through every happy color she knew, creating a light show that turned the cockpit into a rainbow. For the first time since her parents died, Zira felt completely safe and loved. They were no longer just a human and an alien sharing a ship. They were family, chosen and cherished, heading toward a future neither could have imagined, alone. 2 months after Jake rescued Zira from Kepler 442b, their peaceful life was shattered when they docked at Nexus Prime for routine cargo pickup. Zira had changed dramatically since joining Jake. Her crystal skin now held permanent threads of gold that sparkled when she was happy. She'd grown taller and healthier, and her confidence had bloomed like a flower finding sunlight. She could pilot the ship through simple maneuvers, help with cargo manifests, and even negotiate with traders in 3 different languages. "Can I come with you to the trading post today?" she asked Jake as they prepared to dock. "Sure thing, kiddo. You're getting good at spotting fair deals." Her skin brightened with pride. Jake had discovered that Zira had inherited strong empathic abilities from her Vistani side. She could sense when people were lying or trying to cheat them. It made her invaluable during negotiations. But as they walked through Nexus Prime's busy corridors, Zira suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Her skin flashed white with terror. "What is it?" Jake asked, immediately on alert. "Vistani," she whispered, pointing down the corridor. "A whole delegation. They're coming this way." Jake followed her gaze and saw them. 6 tall figures in flowing robes, their crystal skin a pale blue that indicated formal business. At their head walked an elderly Vistani with elaborate patterns carved into his skin. This was clearly someone important. "It's okay," Jake said quietly, putting a protective hand on Zira's shoulder. "They probably don't even know you're here. But the lead Vithani was already walking directly toward them, his black eyes fixed on Zira with unmistakable recognition. "Child of the broken line," the elder said in heavily accented standard. "I am Elder Thorn of the Vithani Council. You will come with us now." Zira's skin went completely white, then flashed through rapid cycles of fear colors. She stepped closer to Jake, seeking his protection. "I'm sorry," Jake said politely but firmly. "I think there's been a mistake. Zira is my ward. We have legal guardianship papers filed with the Galactic Court." Elder Thorn's expression didn't change. "Human papers mean nothing to us. The child carries Vithani blood. She belongs with her true people." "Her true people abandoned her," Jake shot back, his temper rising. "Where were you when she was starving on Kepler Station? Where was the mighty Vithani Council when a scared little girl needed help?" The other Vithani behind Thorn murmured among themselves, their skin flashing irritated orange. Thorn raised one hand, and they fell silent. "We were unaware of her potential," Thorn admitted, "but recent reports indicate the child has developed significant empathic abilities. Such talents are rare and valuable. She requires proper training that only pure Vithani can provide. So now she's useful to you," Jake said with disgust. "Now that she might be worth something, suddenly you care." Zira found her voice. "I don't want to go with them," she said clearly, her skin cycling through determined gold and defiant silver. "Jake is my family now. He chose me when nobody else would." Elder Thorn looked down at her with cold eyes. "Child, you do not understand the importance of your heritage. Humans are a primitive species, barely capable of caring for themselves, let alone guiding a young Vithani through crucial developmental stages. Their lifespans are too brief, their understanding too limited." "Jake understands me better than you ever did," Zira said, her voice getting stronger. "He learned my language. He studied my people's customs. He saved my life when the Council left me to die." "The Council made a regrettable error," Thorn said dismissively. "But that can be corrected. You will return with us to the homeworld where you belong." "No," Zira said simply. The word rang with surprising authority. Elder Thorn's skin flashed, angry red. "You are a child you do not choose. The Vithani Council has spoken." That's when Jake stepped forward, putting himself between Thorn and Zira. "On Nexus Prime, Galactic Court law applies. Zira is my legal ward, and she just clearly stated she doesn't want to go with you. So I suggest you back off." "Primitive, human law," Thorn sneered. "The Vithani are a founding member of the Galactic Federation. Our claims supersede your crude adoption papers." "Then I guess we'll let the courts decide," Jake said evenly. Within hours, security officers had served both parties with legal notices. A formal custody hearing would be held in 3 days before the Nexus Prime Arbitration Court. Until then, Zira would remain with Jake, but they weren't allowed to leave the station. Back on their ship, Zira sat in the cockpit staring out at the stars, her skin a deep, troubled blue. "I'm scared," she admitted to Jake. "What if they make me go back? What if the court says humans can't raise Vithani children?" Jake sat down beside her. "Hey, look at me. We're going to fight this. We have proof of how well you're doing, medical, records showing your improvement, documentation of everything we've been through together. But what if it's not enough? What if they're right that you're too primitive to take care of me?" Jake's expression hardened. "Zira, do you know what makes humans primitive compared to other species?" She shook her head. "Nothing," he said firmly. "Humans are newer to space travel, that's all. But we're not primitive. We just do things differently. And sometimes, different is exactly what someone needs." That night, Zira couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Elder Thorn's cold eyes and the way the other Vithani had looked at her, like she was a piece of property to be claimed, not a person with her own thoughts and feelings. She found Jake in the galley, working on his computer, preparing their legal defense. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Research, building our case. Look at this." He showed her the screen, which displayed her medical records from when he first found her compared to her current status. "You've gained 15 pounds of healthy weight. Your mineral levels are perfect. Your psychological evaluation shows dramatic improvement in confidence and emotional stability. Zira looked at the numbers, but they felt cold and distant. Will that be enough to convince them? It should be. But Zira, I need you to understand something. If somehow the court rules against us, I won't give up. I'll appeal. I'll fight it through every legal channel available. You're my daughter now, and I protect what's mine. Her skin exploded in warm gold at those words. Daughter, she repeated softly. You really think of me that way? From the moment I signed those guardianship papers, Jake said honestly. Blood doesn't make family, kiddo. Love does. Choice does. And I choose you every single day. Zira threw her arms around him in the first spontaneous hug she'd ever given anyone. Her skin glowed so brightly, it lit up the entire galley. I choose. You too, Dad, she whispered. Jake held her tight, feeling the gentle vibration that meant she was purring, a Vithani expression of deep contentment he'd learned about in his research. Then we'll face whatever comes together. Deal? Deal. Outside, their ship, Elderthorn, was meeting with his delegation, planning their legal strategy. They had resources, political influence, and centuries of precedent on their side. To them, this was simply a matter of reclaiming valuable Vithani property from an inferior species. But they had underestimated two things: the fierce love of a human father and the growing strength of a half-Vithani girl who had finally found where she belonged. The battle for Zira's future was about to begin. The Nexus Prime Arbitration Court was packed with spectators from dozens of different species. Word had spread quickly about the custody case, a human fighting the powerful Vithani Council for the right to keep an alien child. Some came out, of curiosity, others to support one side or the other, and many just to see if the rumors were true. Jake sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, Karen Walsh, a sharp human attorney who specialized in interspecies law. Beside him, Zira wore her best clothes, a simple blue dress that Jake had bought her the day before. Her skin was cycling nervously between silver and gold, betraying her anxiety despite her brave face. At the prosecutor's table, Elder Thorn sat with 5 other Vithani Council members and 3 expensive lawyers. They looked confident and imposing in their formal robes, their skin displaying the pale blue of official business. Judge Kethvar, an ancient centauri with kind but sharp eyes, called the court to order with a tap of his gavel. This is a custody hearing to determine the best interests of the minor known as Zira. The Vithani Council claims racial priority and alleges improper care by the current guardian. Prosecutor Veltar, present your case. The Vithani lawyer stood, his movements precise and formal. Honorable Judge, this case is simple. The child Zira carries pure Vithani genetic markers despite her mixed heritage. According to Galactic Law subsection 447b, member species have priority in custody matters involving their own children. The human Jake Morrison, while perhaps well-meaning, is fundamentally incapable of providing proper care for a developing Vithani child. For the next hour, Veltar presented his evidence. He brought in expert witnesses who testified about Vithani, physiology, cultural needs, and the complexity of their empathic development. He showed holographic displays of Vithani children learning traditional light singing, participating in communal mind bonds, and developing their psychic abilities under proper guidance. The human cannot provide these essential experiences, Veltar concluded. Furthermore, humans have an average lifespan of only 80 standard years. This child could outlive 3 human guardians before reaching full maturity. The instability is harmful to proper psychological development. Then came the character assassination. Alien witness after alien witness took the stand to testify about human failings. A Corvin merchant claimed humans were too aggressive and violent. A Centauri diplomat spoke about human emotional instability and their tendency toward destructive behavior. They painted a picture of humans as barely civilized primitives who couldn't be trusted with something as precious as a Vithani child. Zira's skin grew darker with each testimony, shifting toward angry red as she listened to species after species insult Jake and all of humanity. Jake put a calming hand on her shoulder, but his own jaw was clenched tight with suppressed fury. The prosecution's final witness was Dr. Yathara, a Vethani psychologist. "I examined the child yesterday," she testified. "While she appears physically healthy, I found disturbing signs of cultural disconnection. She cannot perform basic light songs, shows no development of traditional empathic bonds, and speaks Vethani with a crude accent. The human has failed to preserve her connection to her own people." "Your Honor," Karen Walsh objected, standing. "The witness is ignoring the context. This child was abandoned by her own people and left to starve. Any cultural disconnection stems from Vethani rejection, not human care." Judge Kethavar nodded. Sustained. "Dr. Yathara, please limit your testimony to your actual findings, not speculation about causation." When the prosecution rested, Karen Walsh stood to present Jake's defense. She was a small woman, but her voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other configurations," she began. "This case isn't about racial superiority or cultural purity. It's about love. It's about a man who found a dying child and chose to save her when everyone else walked away." She presented Jake's evidence methodically. Medical records showing Zira's dramatic improvement under his care. Educational assessments proving she was learning at an accelerated rate. Psychological evaluations that documented her transformation from a traumatized, suicidal child to a confident, happy young person. "Mr. Morrison didn't just provide food and shelter," Walsh continued. "He learned Vethani customs, studied their dietary needs, researched their psychology, and adapted his entire life around one child's well-being. He did what the Vethani Council refused to do. He treated her like she mattered." Jake's first witness was Dr. Martinez, the human doctor who had examined Zira when they first arrived at Nexus Prime. "In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a dramatic health improvement," he testified. "When I first saw this child 3 months ago, she was severely malnourished, showing signs of chronic stress, and had what we would classify as failure to thrive syndrome. Today she's healthy, alert, and psychologically stable. This transformation is entirely due to Mr. Morrison's care." Next came Captain Betty Chen, a human cargo hauler who had worked the same routes as Jake for years. "I've known Jake Morrison for over a decade," she testified. "He's one of the most honest, reliable people in the business. If Jake says he'll do something, it gets done. If he makes a promise, he keeps it. That child is lucky to have him." But the most powerful witness was unexpected. Commander Vexthal, a Vethani military officer, took the stand wearing full dress uniform. His presence caused a stir among the Vethani delegation. "I have observed this human and the child Zira over several weeks during cargo runs," he testified. "The human demonstrates superior parenting instincts compared to most species I have encountered. He prioritizes the child's needs above his own comfort, provides both discipline and affection in appropriate measures, and has successfully taught her skills that will serve her well in adult life." Elder Thorne's skin flashed angry red. "Commander, you forget your duty to your own people." Judge Kethvar slammed his gavel. "The witness will not be intimidated. Commander, please continue." "The Vethani Council abandoned this child because of her mixed heritage," Bexthal said firmly. "We failed in our duty. This human succeeded where we did not. Honor demands that we acknowledge this truth." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. A Vethani military hero had just publicly criticized his own people's actions. Finally, it was Zira's turn to testify. Judge Kethavar had initially ruled that she was too young, but Karen Walsh had successfully argued that at 12 years old, Zira was mature enough to speak for herself. Zira walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, her skin cycling rapidly through nervous colors. But when she started talking, her voice was clear and strong. "Before Jake found me, I wanted to die," she said simply. "Nobody wanted me. The council called me genetic mistake and half-breed trash. Other aliens would walk away when they saw me coming. I was so hungry and scared and alone that I wished I could just stop existing. The courtroom was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Then Jake came. He didn't care that I was mixed race. He didn't care that I was different, or broken, or had problems. He just saw a kid who needed help, and he helped. He learned my language so I could feel at home. He studied my people's customs so I wouldn't forget where I came from. He stayed awake for 3 days when I was sick with crystal fever, even though he could have died from exhaustion. Her skin began to glow brighter as she spoke, shifting to warm gold. Jake taught me that family isn't about having the same blood or the same skin color. Family is about choosing each other every day. He chose me when everyone else threw me away. I choose him too. She looked directly at Elder Thorn. You want to take me away from the only real family I've ever had. You want to drag me back to people who rejected me because I might be useful now. But I'm not property. I'm a person, and I choose to stay with my dad. The last word rang through the courtroom with absolute finality. Zira's skin was now glowing so brightly that several spectators had to shield their eyes. Elder Thorn stood up, his skin flashing angry red. The child has been corrupted by primitive human emotions. She cannot make rational decisions. She sounds pretty rational to me, Judge Kethvar said dryly. In fact, she sounds remarkably mature for someone her age. As Zira walked back to her seat, something unexpected happened. She stumbled slightly, and her emotional surge triggered a psychic pulse that rippled through the courtroom. For just a moment, every person present felt what she felt. The love, the loyalty, the absolute certainty that Jake was her real family. The effect was profound. Several alien spectators wiped away tears. Others nodded in understanding. Even some of the Vithani delegation looked uncomfortable with their position. Judge Kethvar called a recess to consider his decision. As the courtroom emptied, Jake hugged Zira tightly. You were amazing up there, kiddo, he said proudly. Did I do okay? I got so scared I might have said something wrong. You said everything right. You told the truth. And that's all anyone can ask for. Outside the courtroom, Elder Thorn approached Jake with his delegation behind him. Human, you have turned the child against her own people. This will have consequences. Jake stepped protectively in front of Zira. The only consequence will be me raising my daughter to be a good person, something you apparently couldn't figure out how to do. 1 year after the custody battle, the Wanderer had become something Jake never expected. A real home filled with laughter, love, and the occasional chaos that comes with raising children. The ship itself had been transformed. What used to be a bare-bones cargo hauler now had personal touches everywhere. Zira's artwork covered the galley walls, colorful drawings of planets they'd visited and people they'd met. Her bedroom, once a converted storage space, now had proper furniture, a collection of books in 3 languages, and crystals from a dozen different worlds that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. But the biggest change wasn't to the ship. It was to their family. Alex, stop hiding my tools, Jake called out as he searched for his plasma wrench. Just because you can fit in smaller spaces doesn't mean you should reorganize my workshop. A teenage boy poked his head out from behind the engine housing, grinning, sheepishly. Alex Chen was 16, human, and had been living on the streets of Port Meridian when Jake and Zira found him 3 months ago. He was quick with machines, quicker with his mouth, and had a talent for getting into trouble that matched his talent for getting out of it. I wasn't hiding it, Alex protested. I was organizing. There's a difference. Uh-huh, Jake said, accepting the wrench with a suspicious look. And I suppose you organized my spare parts catalog too? That was definitely me, said a gravelly voice from deeper in the engine room. Crix emerged, wiping oil off his 4 hands with a rag. He was Corvin, a species of furry, 6-limbed engineers known for their technical skills and their superstitions. A cargo accident had left him stranded and injured on the same station where they'd found Alex. Jake had offered him passage in exchange for ship repairs, and somehow he'd never left. The human system was inefficient, Crix explained, his whiskers twitching with amusement. I have improved it by 47%. Your improvement system gives me headaches, Jake said, but he was smiling. In truth, He'd never been happier. His ship ran better than ever. Cargo runs were more profitable with a full crew, and most importantly, none of them were alone anymore. "Dad, we're getting a call from Nexus Prime," Zira announced from the cockpit. At 13 now, she was tall for her age, and her crystal skin had developed beautiful new patterns, threads of silver and gold that sparkled when she moved. She'd also become an excellent pilot and navigator, with an intuitive understanding of hyperspace routes that impressed even experienced captains. Jake joined her at the communications console. "Put it through, kiddo." Administrator Vex's familiar four-armed form appeared on the screen. "Morrison, I have a cargo contract that might interest you. High-value medical supplies to the Epsilon colony. They're dealing with an outbreak and need the shipment within 10 days. "What's the pay?" Zira asked, taking over the negotiation like Jake had taught her. Her empathic abilities had grown stronger over the year, making her incredibly effective at reading people's intentions. Vex named a figure that made Jake's eyebrows rise. "That's generous," he said suspiciously. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just dangerous territory. The route goes through the neutral zone, and there have been reports of raiders in that sector." Jake considered it. The money was good, enough to upgrade their shields and maybe even buy Alex the technical training he'd been wanting, but it was risky with 3 kids on board. "I'll take it," Zira said decisively. "We can handle raiders. Alex knows their communication frequencies. Crix can boost our defenses, and I can sense them coming before they see us." "Since when do you make the crew decisions?" Jake asked, amused. "Since I became co-captain," she said with a grin that made her skin sparkle. "You put me on the official registration forms, remember?" He had too. Somewhere along the way, Zira had stopped being just his ward and become his partner in running their small family business. She handled negotiations, managed their finances, and had developed an impressive network of contacts across 3 systems. "All right, co-captain. We'll take the job." 3 days later, they were halfway through the neutral zone when Zira suddenly stiffened in the pilot's seat. "We have company," she announced. 3 ships trying to stay hidden behind that asteroid cluster. They're excited about something. Probably us." "Raiders?" Jake asked, already reaching for the weapons controls. "Definitely. Alex, how are those communication jammers coming?" The teenager's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Almost ready. Give me 2 more minutes." "Crix, divert auxiliary power to shields," Jake ordered. "Already done, Captain Jake. Also improved shield harmonics by 16%. Raiders will have unpleasant surprise." The first raider ship decloaked directly in front of them, followed quickly by 2 more. They were Corvan pirates, fast, aggressive, and usually not too bright. "Unknown vessel, prepare to be boarded," came the transmission. "Surrender your cargo and no one gets hurt." Jake looked at Zira, who shook her head with amusement. "They're lying. They plan to space us after taking everything." "Figured as much," Jake said. He opened a return channel. "This is Captain Morrison of the Wanderer. I have a counter-proposal. You leave us alone and I don't let my daughter show you why picking on human ships is a bad idea." The raiders laughed over the communication channel. "1 little cargo hauler against 3 warships? You humans really are as stupid as they say." "Zira?" Jake asked mildly. His daughter smiled and her skin began to glow brighter. Over the past year, her empathic abilities had developed far beyond normal Vithani ranges. She could not only sense emotions but project them over short distances. She reached out with her mind and touched the raiders' thoughts, flooding them with pure, overwhelming terror. It was the fear she'd felt when she was abandoned and alone, magnified and focused like a psychic weapon. The raider ship suddenly broke formation, their pilots screaming over the open channel about shadows and monsters that weren't there. 2 of them fled immediately back into hyperspace. The third tried to maintain attack position but kept weaving erratically as if dodging invisible enemies. "What's happening to us?" the lead raider demanded. "What are you doing?" "Teaching you a lesson," Jake said calmly. "That's not my daughter. You're messing with. She's a fully trained Vithani psychic. Want to find out what else she can do?" The third raider ship disappeared into hyperspace so fast, they left scorch marks on local space. Alex's voice came over the intercom, full of admiration. "Zira, that was amazing. Remind me never to make you really angry." "The secret is not getting angry," Zira said, her skin settling back to normal colors. "Getting focused is much more effective." They delivered their medical supplies to Epsilon Colony without further incident. The colonists were so grateful they threw a celebration dinner and gave the crew bonus payment. Zira spent the evening teaching local children how to make light patterns with glow sticks, while Alex challenged the teenagers to racing games on their hoverbikes. Crix, meanwhile, had found the colony's chief engineer and was deep in technical discussions about improving their power grid efficiency. "We've got a good crew," Jake said to Zira as they watched their family interact with the colonists. "We've got a good family," she corrected. "That's different." Jake nodded, feeling that familiar warmth in his chest that came whenever he realized how far they'd all come. Alex had gone from a street thief to a skilled technician with a bright future. Crix had found purpose and belonging after years of wandering alone. And Zira had become the heart of their little group. She was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who mediated arguments, who could sense when someone was having a bad day and needed extra support. She'd grown into a confident young woman who spoke 4 languages, could pilot a ship through an asteroid field, and had empathic abilities that impressed even elder Vithani. More importantly, she was happy. Her skin showed constant threads of gold now, the color of contentment and love. She laughed every day, asked a million questions about everything, and had developed a sense of humor that kept everyone entertained during long hyperspace jumps. "Dad," she said, using the title that never failed to make his heart skip. "I was thinking about our next destination." "Oh yeah? Where to?" "There's a message from the Vithani homeworld. Commander Vextal recommended us for a cultural exchange program. They want to learn about human child-rearing methods." Jake raised an eyebrow. "The same people who tried to take you away want parenting advice from humans." Zira's skin sparkled with amusement. "Apparently, word has spread about how well I turned out. Some Vithani families with mixed heritage children want to try the human method of raising them." "And what exactly is the human method?" "According to the message, it's providing unconditional love regardless of genetic purity, prioritizing the child's emotional needs over cultural expectations, and treating mixed heritage children as gifts rather than problems." Jake laughed. "That's not the human method, kiddo. That's just the right method." "I know," Zira said, her skin glowing warmly. "But if they want to call it human, that's fine with me. Maybe other kids won't have to go through what I did." That night, as the family gathered in the galley for their evening meal, Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him. Alex was telling an exaggerated story about their encounter with the raiders, complete with